Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel and back to my third iteration of the top 10 position rankings list. We've already done the point guards and shooting guards. Of course, if you see this video now, this is the video for the small forwards. Now, if you're new and you haven't seen those two videos, make sure you go watch those videos after this one. If you're not new or even a returning subscriber that hasn't watched in a little while, welcome back. I'm glad you're here. And just before we hop into the top 10, we're gonna lay some ground rules. Of course, first of all, it's a subjective list. You probably have a different list from me, and I'm sure my list is different from yours. So with that being the case, drop your list down below, or even drop some criticisms of my list down below. Either way, let's have a good and open, honest, and most importantly, healthy form of communication with regard to this basketball stuff. Of course, if you're returning, you already know how this thing goes. I ain't gotta lace you up too much, but like, comment, subscribe, regardless if you're new or old. I guess I could say old. I don't know if old works in this context, but regardless, like, comment, and subscribe, and let's hop into this top 10 video. Weirdly enough, I didn't really do honorable mentions for any other position. I didn't really feel the need to, but with regard to small forwards, I kind of felt the need to. There were three small forwards that it was hard not putting them on the list. It's Franz Wagner, OG Anunoby, and Brandon Miller. Now, two out of those three guys being Franz and Brandon Miller, I do expect them to get into this top 10, maybe even OG Anunoby, but that more so depends on his role with the team now that Mikal Bridges is on the team. We'll get into that a little bit further when we do talk about Mikal Bridges. With regard to Franz and Brandon Miller, I think they still have some time to get there. They are some younger guys. Of course, Brandon Miller only being in his second year, but already showing that dog mentality in that second year. And I'm gonna be honest with you guys, with regard to Franz, a large reason to him missing the list, it came from his terrible playoff play and the fact that I think he has some growing to do before he should be on this list and before it would even be justified putting him on the list. But now that the honorable mentions are out the way, I've explained that, let's hop into the true top 10 of the video. And we're gonna start that top 10 with Mikal Bridges. With Mikal Bridges, we already know he's a true Iron Man of sorts, but with the trade sending him to the Nets last offseason, we thought we were going to see Mikal Bridges take some leaps or maybe even have a little bit of digression because of his newfound role as the #1 guy for the Brooklyn Nets. In this new role, he averaged 25 and 4 while shooting 43% from the field and 37% from three, and he played in all 82 games. Of course, I already mentioned his newfound #1 spot role, but the thing is, the Nets weren't that good of a team. Obviously, it's hard enough adjusting to a new role, but adjusting to a #1 role when you were the #2 or #3 option on the team prior, while also being on a bad team where the supporting guys, they're not good enough to make that job easier, it makes it that much tougher. I think Mikal Bridges going to the Nets hurt him with regard to how we look at him as a player. Now, of course, I've always thought he was a pretty good #2, #3 option kind of guy, but we did see some people considering him to be a #1 option player that can ascend to a level where we see him as one of the best two-way players in the league. Obviously, that wasn't the case with the Nets, and he wasn't horrible, but again, it was a bad Nets team. This offseason, he was traded to the Knicks to fully form that Nova Knicks team prior to the trade of Dante DiVincenzo, and I think this will be the perfect role for him going forward, essentially being the third option behind Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns. We already saw him as a second option back in Phoenix, and he excelled in that role as well. But when it comes to a team that's actually vying to win, not to say the Suns weren't, because they were looking to win as well, but when it comes to a team where you actually gel with them, you know the guys, you know how they play, while also being able to find your own shots and looks because you've already played with them to where you've had to do that, it makes it that much easier for Mikal Bridges to excel this year. Now, I don't see him having a crazy rise in numbers because, again, he's a third option when he was just going from first option touches and was only pretty much scoring 20 points a game. But I do see him as a player that's more efficient and being able to showcase that two-way prowess a little bit more than he was before. The one thing that does worry me about Mikal is that changed jump shot. I don't know if some of you guys have seen it, but it has circulated around Twitter a little bit. And his jump shot, it just looks clunkier than what it already looked like before. And I mean, hopefully it helps his three-point percentage, but I don't see why you change that. Now, my only estimation of it is the fact that, you know, maybe if we change his jump shot to be mechanically sound in some areas, it might be able to boost that 37% shooting from three up to a 40 to mid 40% range. But that's the only explanation I could come up with that. And the fact that it looks clunky, but also throughout the preseason, it's looked even worse, not only on the court, but statistically as well. He hasn't shot well at all. Now, like I said, this is a new change, so hopefully he gets accustomed to it and he's able to shake back to his real shooting form. But if not, this is trouble for the Knicks because they need a guy that can stretch the floor like Mikal Bridges normally can. Coming in at number 9, I have Brandon Ingram, a guy who averages 25-5 while shooting 49% from the field and 35% from the three in 64 contests. Now, with Brandon Ingram, I've always loved him as a player. I'm a Lakers fan, so I was ecstatic when we drafted him in the first place. Now, of course, we traded him in that Anthony Davis trade, and he's been in New Orleans since. But being in New Orleans since, we haven't seen much of an progression from Brandon Ingram. But you know, being in New Orleans, I don't think we've seen the sort of progression that we expected, or at least I expected as a Laker fan that drafted him originally expected to see. Personally, I feel like a trade is on the horizon come trade deadline time, especially after contract disputes this offseason with the Pelicans. And despite being a steady player that could get better from three, I honestly feel like we've seen what we've seen from BI. There's really no growth from here. At this point, he's reached his ceiling potential-wise. The worst part about it is he seems to have maxed out in his 4th year. He stayed around the same place statistically from that point forward, and we haven't seen anything more from him. So maybe a change of scenery is something that we should be expecting and may even help Brandon Ingram going into the future. I think it would be a good idea to get a trade out of there, but also if the Pelicans can get some things in return to actually either strengthen their team or be able to retool for next year going forward in the event that Zion is unhealthy once again. BI is still a great player, and I think he can contribute to any contending team, but when it comes to the Pelicans, we've just seen a lot of stagnation, plateauing, so to speak, and we haven't seen much growth. But even still, BI has remained a very, very efficient, consistent, and very great offensive player. Moving on to number 8, I have Scottie Barnes. Scottie is honestly a guy that I expect to move into that top 5 of small forwards, maybe even, let's say top 7. Top 5 might be a little bit of a stretch now that I'm thinking about who that top 5 is, but I'd say he's comfortable in that 6, 7, 8 range as of right now, with potential to move to that 6th spot going forward. Scottie is the prototypical Swiss Army knife and can do some of everything for the Toronto Raptors on both ends of the floor at a very, very high level. Scottie averages 28-6 on 47% shooting from the field and 34% from three while playing 60 games last year. He was also a first-time All-Star, and he became just the 4th player ever in league history to post 19-8-6 at 22 years of age or younger. This list includes Luka, Magic, and Oscar Robertson. In my humble of opinions, I think that Scottie, to reach that next level of player, he needs to hone in that jump shot a little bit, which I think that could see him becoming an all-NBA player. For Raptors fans, the potential, it does look promising. This isn't just hot wind that I'm blowing, because he went from shooting 28% from three as a rookie to shooting 34% this season. I think Barnes will continue to be the talent that the Raptors build around for the next coming years and can quickly help the franchise to win some games and become competitive this season, especially after acquisition of RJ Barrett, who has had new life since coming to Toronto, and Emmanuel Quickly, who has found his footing in the league. Coming in at number 7, I have Jimmy Butler. Now it's funny because I have it listed in my notes that he played in 60 games last year, but It almost doesn't feel like he played in 60 games. I'm gonna be completely honest. He admitted to sleepwalking through the regular season, and while I think that was more tongue-in-cheek, I don't think he takes that really seriously. It does really perceive that way, and not just this past year, but the years before that he's been there. This year is a contract year for Jimmy, and what I assume is a make it or break it kind of year for him as a Heat player. Since 2020, the Heat have been a team that remained in dark horse territory while seeing some success, but never reaching that point of stability to feel comfortable building upon that foundation that sees you being able to be in that play in contention territory. Of course, the season ended poorly for the six-time All-Star, with him getting hurt in Miami's first playing game and missing the rest of the playoffs after he already had a very quiet regular season. Of course, after watching Netflix's Starting Five, I don't want to give too much, I guess I would say, pressure on Jimmy Butler, because we found out he had a death, very close death to him, his father, and I don't really want to put too much on Jimmy, because I understand, at least now, this year has shown me what death feels like, and it's tough. It's hard to get out of bed every day and do the things that you have to do to be successful, and I can only imagine that on a grand scale where you're a star of a franchise trying to lead them to the promised land. So with that said, I'm not going to give too much on Jimmy Butler, but what I can say is it showed that he was going through something throughout this season. Now, with all that said, Jimmy Butler is still a winner. I believe that in my core of core, my heart of hearts. A guy who I'm willing to bet that when backs are against the wall, he's a guy that you bet on that's gonna show up. And to be completely frank, I think this is a year where his back is against the wall. Like I said, a contract year where this is possibly his last opportunity to get a real payday in the NBA, a real big payday that is. Jimmy is a guy that I will bet on 10 times out of 10 when his back is against the wall and he has to respond, because it seems to be that's when he shows up the most. So with Jimmy Butler, I have him at number 7 with the potential to rise a little bit, but overall, I think he needs to have a fire regular season matched with a good offseason for the Miami Heat to actually try to give him that long-term deal that he's seeking. Coming in at number 6, I have DeMar DeRozan. DeMar is one of the league's top mid-range assassins, dispelling the belief that mid-range shooting is the least efficient shot in basketball by himself. Well, I won't say by himself. KD's in that conversation too, but KD, he's an all-timer. That's one of those things where it's like, you know, he's an outlier. You can't really judge it based on him. But with DeMar, he's beating that notion single-handedly. What I mean by DeMar dispelling that belief, it's the fact that he's shooting them so efficiently. He's shooting 50% from the floor over the past 6 seasons, averaging 24 points, 6 assists, and all the while, this was on a losing Bulls team. The Bulls were abysmal last year, and even still, DeMar ranked 10th overall in offensive win shares, which goes to show how elite he really is. On the defensive side, he is limited, and he doesn't really shoot the 3, which may explain why he may not be a guy who can be the best player on a championship team. However, his union with the Kings seems perfect, at least to me. Of course, his numbers will likely dip as he's sharing the same space with Domas and Fox, all the while the team not really being his like he's had before, but the fit should be fun. I think this will be a Kings team that you should be willing to watch, just as it was not last year, but the year before. The Kings needed an offensive boost, and DeMar gives that like none other. Now, the one question for the Kings and DeMar is, can he show he is a high-level playoff performer as well? This is something he hasn't really been able to do to this point in his career, and I think with the Kings, he's actually gonna have that opportunity to show that. Even if they are a first round out in the deep Western Conference, I do think if DeMar has a great playoff showing, it does provide a little bit of comfort to the Kings with strengthening the roster and trying to run it back and get back to the playoffs the next year. At number 5, I have Paul George. Paul George is a 22, 5, and 4 kind of guy, very efficient, 48% from the field, 42% from three, somewhere around that nature. And he played 74 games last year. He was the rock for the Clippers for the most part. Now, of course, Kawhi did play in 68 games last year, but Paul George was clearly more healthy than Kawhi was throughout the year. And in my opinion, PG was an all-star in each of the last 2 years. And he's the third player to complete the Sixers' new big three of Embiid, Maxey, and now him. PG was very efficient last year, but the only thing I personally want to see from him is the ability to get to the line. Paul George is a 90% free throw shooter, but he's only getting to the line about 5 times a game in his career, many times less than that. If he could get this number to about 7 to 9 attempts, I genuinely think PG could reach that all-NBA level that he hasn't reached since 2020, 2021. To add credence to that, the year in OKC when he averaged 28 and was an MVP candidate, he was getting to the line 7 times a game, the most in his career by far. As PG ages, I think he should find a way to get to the line a little bit more, make his points a little bit easier on himself so he's not getting majority of them in the flow of offense. Now, my biggest thing with PG and what's always frustrated me about him, because I'm gonna be honest, PG was one of my favorite guys in the league when I was younger, around 2010, 2011 when he came in. And it's been frustrating because he has the makeup, the body, the build, the archetype, the game to be one of the game's greatest. And yet it seems he's always fallen short aside from one season, and that's the MVP year that we spoke on. Now, of course, to this point, PG has admitted himself he's not the #1 guy on a championship team, but whether he was joking or not, whether that was hyperbole or not, he seems to be one of the best third options in the league while having the opportunity to become a second option in the games that Embiid is load managing. Overall, I want to see PG take on more of an ownership role on the offensive side to basically say, this is my shit, you're not getting the ball, I'm keeping this ball for this shot. Now, of course, he can't do that over Embiid and Maxey, but I want to see him do that over the other players on the team because I've yet to see that since the Pacers days. Coming in at number 4, I have his ex-running mate in Kawhi Leonard. Now, before we talk about Kawhi, I just want to take a moment of silence for what could have been. Zaza Pachulia, you will pay for your crimes against humanity, specifically against Kawhi Leonard in the outlook of his career, because I genuinely believe that Zaza Pachulia is why Kawhi has the degenerative knee disorder that he does now. That's for another video on another day. I got y'all. With regard to this ranking though, Kawhi is still one of the best small forwards in the league and obviously one of the best playoff risers we've ever seen all time. The 2 times final MVP genuinely cannot find a good bill of health, and it sucks to say, but I think this is the beginning of the end. The degenerative knee disorder is a problem in a sport where your knees are your money. That's where you make your bread for the most part, you know what I'm saying? So with that said, the fact that he's aging, the fact that Team USA sent him home, the fact that he essentially isn't going to be ready for the season opener, and this might be a hot take, I think Kawhi's not playing at all this season. It spells the beginning of the end. But regardless, Kawhi was a 24, 6-4 type of player last year. His efficient self as always, shooting 52.5% from the field and 42% from three in 68 games. This is the most he's played since 2016, and yet we saw the way his summer essentially went, where he really needed that rest, went and tried out for Team USA, and now his knee is just out of there. He probably should have just took the summer off, I'm not gonna lie. Before we hop into the top 3, if you made it this far into the video, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't done it already. If you have done it, hey, feel free to leave another comment. It won't make me know, never mind, or share the video. But regardless, I'm glad. Thank you for making it this far into the video. Let's hop into the top 3 so we can get this out of there. And number 3, and the lowest I'll likely ever have this man, but I have LeBron James. And it is crazy to say because I think I had him number 2 last year, and I would keep him at number 2, but I'll give you guys the reason why he's not number 2 for me this year. There's honestly not too much to say about LeBron. We know he's still likely the best player on the Lakers, even with AD on the that's crazy to say. AD last year was a dog. I can't give LeBron the nod over AD no more. I was doing it, can't do it anymore. But with that said, AD, you need to step into that number 1 role. I don't know how this came to a, AD motivational speech, but regardless, LeBron has been the rock for my Lakers franchise ever since Kobe has left. We had a few down years, then LeBron came, got us another chip, and we've actually had some excitement with regard to Lakers Nation and being able to watch our team. Even though we've had some lows, we've had some Darvin Hams of the world, we've had some things go on. LeBron has still been the steady guy that he's always been, the pro that he's always been, and he continues to show us why he is the greatest, and I mean the greatest of all time. At number 2, I have Kevin Durant. Of course, statistically, their numbers mirror each other a lot. The only difference between KD and Bron is Bron's facilitation, the fact that he averages 8 assists to KD's about 5-6 assists a game. But either way, the reason I put KD over Bron, I think his game translates more with regard to aging. Obviously, LeBron is more of a brute force, get to the cup, one of the greatest finishers of all time that we've seen, and even still does it to this day. And while his three-point shooting is coming along, he's shooting it a lot more. He's shooting it a lot more efficient than he ever has before. I still think the way Kevin Durant plays the game makes it easier for him to stay on this track for even longer than what LeBron already is. He's a mid-range assassin and can shoot the ball from deep. And one thing that I know about basketball players, as a basketball player, or a former one, I should say, is the fact that shooting only gets better with age. It doesn't really go away. If you got that hammer, you got that hammer. And I think KD is one of those where he gonna continue to have that hammer. The one dribble pull up is money, is cash, is to the point where I am expecting to see an inbound right after he shoots, because his jumper is just like that. And I say all that to say, LeBron and him are interchangeable. You could have him 2A, 2B if you wanted to. But that's why I have KD over Bron. And finally, we made it to the top of the list. If you've been around basketball, follow basketball, I don't even think you really gotta watch basketball to know this, but Jason Tatum, number 1 spot. I think it's clear. He's on the freaking thumbnail and y'all ain't seen him in the video yet. So, I mean, that should be a sign. But in any case, if I gotta explain it, JT is 27, 8, and 5 kind of guy. He's shooting 47% from the field, 40% from 3 in 74 games. Oh yeah, he just won the finals. He just got gold, even though Steve Kerr tried him. We on your head. Steve Kerr, watch them black vans outside your crib. We don't worry about it. But with that said, Jason Tatum is the clear number 1 in my humblest of opinions, and he's gonna be that for years to come. I don't see anybody passing him. And with regard to the younger players, the only player that I see getting even close to him on this list is Brandon Miller, and that's still going to take some years to even get to that point. I said it before when I was talking about Jaylen Brown, and I'm going to say it again with Jason Tatum. I think this is one of those years for the Celtics where they're more than likely to repeat, but even further, it's going to be one of those years where they might not lose at home. It seems like when they get that first chip, the rest of the chips in the dynasty, I don't want to say they're easier, but it's more of a relaxed approach to it. You're not so tense, you're not so upright, you're not so uptight because you're trying so hard to win a chip. You already got one, you know what it takes, so you're really just trying to redo the things you did before to get that first one. But overall, Jason Tatum rounds this list out and is the number 1 small forward in the NBA. Now, if you made it this far into the video, I appreciate you watching this whole video because, hey, I love you. That's first off. But secondly, it's a pretty long video to just sit and watch through. Maybe if you're not watching, maybe you're doing something at work, you're just listening. But either way it goes, I appreciate you if you clicked on this video regardless. I will be dropping my top 10 power forwards and centers next, and then we'll get back into, the regular flow of uploads that I used to have before. And we're going to start having more basketball discussions, more outlooks, more whatever you guys want. Comment down below. But either way, I appreciate you guys being here. Appreciate you guys listening to me. It is your boy TB with the greatest hoop stories in the base on the tube. And as always, I am out. Peace.